Breaking the Cycle, Shadow Workbook, written and narrated by Brian Wolf. Copyright 2025 by Brian Wolf. Publisher, Interface Publishing and Media, LLC. All rights reserved. Introduction by the author. I have been fascinated by self-improvement for a very long time. This is perhaps because early in my life, I needed the various forms of self-improvement to grapple with the many challenges I was faced with myself. Poverty, a learning disability, abusive family members, these were the things I grappled with. It seemed to me that things like self-help books held the answer to all my problems. Many years later in life, after I'd climbed out of all of these obstacles I just mentioned, I found myself with the same desire to continue to improve my life. I just felt that the more complacent I was, the less satisfied I was. For me, happiness wasn't just about being satisfied and content. It was about continuing to grow as a person and understand the world around me. The victory we feel after climbing the metaphorical mountains we encounter in life are only one part of the formula to happiness. The other half of this formula is the climb itself. It is with this mindset that I have made shadow work a part of my life's routine. It has become an essential tool in my relationships, my professional life, and nearly everything I do. There are many people paying thousands of dollars for therapy, self-help, and motivational seminars, and the principles and teachings, and all of those things are available for free in this workbook and scattered in many places throughout the internet. To the reader, I don't know why you're reading these pages, but I'm guessing that you, like I, are probably searching for something. It's that search that drove you here and will keep driving you. I hope you realize that it's this journey and search that can be a part of your own formula for happiness. Consider this workbook my gift to you on your journey. Use it thoughtfully to improve your life and be safe on your journey, fellow traveler. First, a brief history on the origin of shadow work. Carl Gustav Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded analytical psychology. Initially a close collaborator of Sigmund Freud, Jung eventually broke away due to differences in their theories, particularly regarding the nature of unconsciousness. Both of these giants of psychology believed that our unconscious minds influence and drive our conscious behaviors, and in turn, our conscious lives. While Freud emphasized the personal unconscious, which is composed of repressed memories and desires, Jung proposed the existence of a collective unconsciousness, a deep reservoir of archetypes and shared human experiences, a much more complex unconsciousness. While Freud was regarded as the father of psychoanalysts, Jung was regarded as the founder of analytical psychology or Jungian analysis. His work explored symbols, myths, and the integration of opposites within the psyche. Jung's theories profoundly influenced psychology, philosophy, literature, and spirituality, laying the foundation for modern psychology and individuation, the process of becoming one's true self. Jung's theory of the mind divides consciousness into three things: the ego, which is our conscious self; the personal unconscious, that's the part of the mind containing that which has been repressed and forgotten; and finally, the collective unconsciousness, which is the shared psychic structure containing universal symbols and archetypes. A key concept within Jung's framework is the shadow. The shadow represents the unconscious aspects of the self that are repressed due to societal or personal rejection. Our shadow consists of all the traits, emotions, and impulses that the ego deems unacceptable. If ignored, the shadow manifests itself in projection, self-sabotage, and in our unconscious behaviors. Integrating the shadow through shadow work, self-awareness, and acceptance of the repressed parts of ourselves is crucial for psychological growth, allowing individuals to reclaim denied aspects of themselves, achieve wholeness, and become authentic people. Though he did not coin the term shadow work, the history of shadow work is deeply intertwined with Jung's psychological theories. In Jungian thought, shadow work is the practice of uncovering, understanding, and integrating the shadow with the conscious self to achieve individuation. Individuation refers to the process of becoming one's true self, that is, becoming an authentic person. While Jung introduced the concept in the early 20th century, similar practices can be found in Eastern philosophy, shamanistic traditions, and mysticism, which all emphasize self-awareness and confrontation of inner darkness. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, shadow work has expanded beyond psychotherapy and into spiritual and self-help circles, encouraging people to face their suppressed fears, desires, and wounds to foster healing and transformation. Below, I have laid out a number of key shadow work questions, which are divided into 7 key areas, each of which is designed to help you discover that which your shadow has hidden from you in order to protect you from those things about yourself that you may view as negative or unacceptable. Discovering these things about yourself is the first step on the path to integration and individuation. Find a place where you feel safe and can think clearly. Breathe deeply, clear your mind, and truthfully answer each of the following questions. Don't spend too much time thinking about the answers. Go with the first answers that come to mind. They should be intuitive answers. Overthinking the answers will only give your shadow a chance to steer you away from the true answer. Remember that your shadow will always attempt to protect you from the truth. To the listener, I'm going to read these questions off, and they're going to be divided by the 7 key sections I talked about earlier. I'm going to read slowly, and I'm going to pause during each question, and that's deliberate. I want to allow you some time to think about the answers to these questions. And I think the key here is not to dwell on the answer, just to go with the first answer that comes to mind. You may be listening to this while you're driving or on a bus somewhere or a subway, and that's okay. You may not be able to write these answers down. I think the important thing about this is just to think about the answer, to hold it in your mind, and to think about it. A lot of times when I do my shadow work, that's what I do. I don't always write things down. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I do, and I like to think about things and write the answer out. But a lot of times, just having the answer come into your mind and knowing it is one of the key first steps in shadow work. And later on in the workbook, we are going to talk about integration and individuation and how that should work. But for now, the important thing is just to be honest with these answers, let them come into your mind and flow through you, and that is the first step. One more really important thing, and this may seem small to some, but I feel it's important, so I'm going to talk about it. When you listen to this audiobook, you'll notice that I use the second person pronoun, you, in these questions, and that's important. We're here listening to this, doing this work together, and so I think the question makes a greater impact when it's heard in the second person pronoun, when I ask you the question. If you read the workbook, however, there's an appendix in which I use the first person pronoun, I, and that's how the questions are written. I wanted whoever's reading the workbook to have the option of either I or you, because I think it makes a difference. And if you're reading the workbook, you're probably doing this by yourself, and I may be more appropriate. It may resonate on a deeper level with you. I think hearing it, me asking you the question, it's more impactful when we use you instead of I. It may seem like a small thing, but it makes a big difference. So, now to the questions. Part 1, difficult childhood events. Question 1. What childhood memory brings up the most discomfort for you and why? Question 2. In what way did you feel unseen or unheard as a child? Question 3. What emotion were you discouraged from expressing as a child? Question number 4. How did your caregivers handle conflict, and how has it shaped your own responses to conflict as an adult? Question number 5. Were you expected to fulfill any roles like caretaker, overachiever, peacemaker as a child? Did you fulfill any of these roles as a child, and did they take away from your childhood? Question 6. Did you experience any moments where you felt abandoned or neglected as a child? Question 7. How did your caregivers react when you expressed vulnerability as a child? Question 8. What were you taught about failure as a child, and how does it affect you now as an adult? Question 9. Were there any childhood moments where you felt immense shame? If so, what were they? Question number 10, and this is probably the most important question. How do your childhood experiences, namely those you've identified and questions 1 through 9 above, still influence your relationships and your adulthood today? And when you answer this, I want you to think about questions 1 through 9. Think about some of the things that you've answered with. How have those things shaped you as an adult? So, a couple things about these questions. They may have been very easy questions for you to answer. They may have been difficult. I think that really depends on your childhood, and we all had different childhoods. But I think, the most important thing to remember here is that you don't necessarily have to have a traumatic childhood for your childhood to shape you, right? Your childhood, no matter what it was like, had some effect on you. And the overall net effect might have been positive. It might have been negative, but it shaped you somehow. And that's really what these questions attempt to get at. It has nothing to do with having a traumatic childhood. It's simply, how have your childhood experiences shaped you as an adult? We've all have things that we have repressed or hidden about ourselves. Maybe we had really super successful parents who did not approve of failure. Many parents don't. And maybe we've repressed this fear of failure. Confronting that fear only improves your life. It doesn't cause you to fail, but understanding that failure is a part of learning is an aspect of a healthy human being. And so if you've got something as simple as a fear of failure that causes you anxiety, confronting that facing that it is important to individuation, and it'll only improve your life. And that sort of thing does come from childhood, and so that's why these questions are written the way they are. I just wanted to explain that. Part 2, trauma. So these are questions that deal with trauma, and not everybody necessarily has trauma in their life. But trauma, understand, doesn't have to be about some horrible childhood experience. It could be something as simple as a car wreck, a car crash where you got hurt. Maybe you saw someone else get hurt. Trauma is a really complicated thing. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the idea here is to think about something that when you think about it, you feel anxiety or pain, you feel nervous. Everybody has different degrees of trauma stored in their mind from their past. And so that's what these questions really attempt to get at. Because trauma usually involves something that's hidden in the mind that shadow work can help you to address. So let's get started on these questions. Question 1. What is a past experience that you struggle to think about without feeling anxiety or pain? Question 2. How has your body stored past trauma, and how do you feel it physically? Do your muscles get tight? Do you feel stress in your body? Is this related to your trauma? Question 3. What coping mechanisms did you develop to survive painful experiences? Question 4. Have you minimized or rationalized your traumatic experiences? Question 5. What triggers strong emotional reactions in you, and what might that reveal about your past? Question 6. How do you react to situations where you feel powerless? Question 7. What beliefs about safety and trust did you develop because of your trauma? Question 8. In what ways do you sabotage your own happiness due to unresolved pain? Question 9. Have you projected your past pain onto others in unhealthy ways? Question 10. What parts of yourself did you have to suppress to survive your trauma? So that's it for the trauma questions. I want to emphasize something, and that is there may be some of these questions that you had no answer to. Question 8, for instance, in what ways did you sabotage your own happiness due to unresolved pain? Maybe the answer is I didn't, and that's okay. Question 9 is another one. Have you projected your pain onto others in unhealthy ways? And if your answer to that was I haven't, then that's great. Not all of these questions are going to generate some emotion or feeling or answer in you, and that's okay. Shadow work isn't about digging up things that aren't actually there. It's about getting to root causes for the problems in your life. And there may be some of these areas for which you don't have problems, and that's good. That just means you need to focus stronger on other areas, other other segments of these questions, you're likely to find other things that you might not have found here, and that's fine. That's intentional. That's the way this is supposed to work. So let's move on. Part 3, character flaws. Question 1. In what ways do you tend to hurt others intentionally or unintentionally? Question 2. What personality traits and others irritates you the most, and how might they reflect traits that your shadow is hiding from you? This is an important question. It would mean that you have these character traits yourself. Question 3. How do you react when you don't get your way? How might this reaction relate to character traits or flaws that you yourself have? Question 4. Do you struggle with jealousy, envy, or resentment? If so, why? Question 5. In what ways do you seek validation or approval from others, and why? Question 5. How do you manipulate situations or people to serve your own needs? Question 7. What excuses do you use to avoid seeking responsibility for your own actions? Question 8. How do you handle criticism? Do you get defensive? What does that mean about you and what you're being criticized for? Question 9. What negative patterns do you repeat despite knowing that they are harmful? Question 10. What aspects of yourself do you struggle to accept or acknowledge? So I think these questions are really probably some of the most important questions in this workbook, because every human being, everyone has character flaws. It doesn't matter who you are or how fantastic you think you are. We all have flaws in our character. And so one of the latter parts of this workbook involves worksheets and writing down, but I want you to make careful note of any of the character flaws you saw trends for in these questions. Those are the things I want you to write down and make a note of, because those are the things that you can work on. And those are the areas in which you can most improve your life and integrate your shadow into your consciousness. And that's the biggest thing that will help you become an authentic person. As you think about these character flaws, think about what life looks like if you compensate for them and hide them, versus what life looks like if you acknowledge that they're there. Then you can compensate for them in healthy ways. You can play to your strengths, for instance, rather than, continuing to exhibit these flaws and not be good enough in those areas. You can focus on your strengths. That's one of the many ways shadow work can help you be a more authentic, complete, and whole individual. Part 4, psychological blind spots. So what is a blind spot? Well, that's an area in a person's life where they're unable to see their own shortcomings, limitations, or biases in their perception or behavior. And so, in many ways, these may be character flaws, like some of the things we've just talked about and answered. But these in particular are things that you cannot see. And so, think of part 4 as double duty. This is the second part of character flaws. But these should be, hopefully, those character flaws that you can't see. And in particular, this part may be an area that you could get some outside help from, say, a counselor or somebody like that, or a close friend that you trust. These are going to be things that you probably cannot see on your own. Nonetheless, these questions, if answered honestly, will be helpful, and they'll be a good first step to seeing your own psychological blind spots. Let's get started. Question 1. What feedback have you received from others that you have ignored or dismissed? Question 2. Are there patterns in your life and your relationships that you keep repeating but do not fully understand? If so, what are they? Question 3. What aspects of your personality do you struggle to see objectively? These would likely be things you have been criticized for by other people. Question 4. How do you react when someone challenges your worldview? Question 5. Are there traits that you pride yourself on that may actually be overcompensations? Question 6. What do you avoid acknowledging about yourself? Question 7. What do you assume about others that might actually be a projection of your own negative character traits? Question number 8. What hidden fears influence your decisions without you realizing it? Question 9. In what ways might you be limiting your own potential without knowing it? Last question. Question number 10. What patterns do others see in you that you struggle to see in yourself? So look, I'm hoping you see some trends here. Find some blind spots, some character traits that you can write down, and I want you to write those down. I think if you didn't see trends here, that would be unusual. When I answer these questions, of course there are going to be things that others see in me I don't see in myself. That's just human. We all have psychological blind spots. That's a normal thing, right? Like anything, they can become unhealthy if they interfere with our lives, but ultimately everyone has negative character traits that they can't see in themselves. And that's finding these things is what self-improvement and self-discovery and shadow work is all about. So I want you to take these things that you found and just write them down. Even if it's 1 or 2 things, that's a place to start. And we have to start somewhere. Part 5, neuroses. Now, there's a scary word, and, I'm betting you may have just done a double take, right? The word neuroses I typically might associate that with mental illness, as would many people. But let's think carefully about what a neurosis or a neuroses, that's the plural, really is. It's a mental condition, not caused by necessarily any type of mental illness, but it's a condition involving symptoms of stress. That's it, right? So those symptoms could include anxiety, they could include depression, obsessive behavior. But the bottom line is that a neuroses is a condition caused by stress. And so that's what we're looking for in these questions, those things that stress you. Where is the stress in your life coming from? So let's not overthink these questions. If you're answering these questions, it doesn't mean you're crazy. It just means you're trying to find the stress in your life, and neuroses are the symptoms of that stress. Let's get started. Question 1. What are your biggest fears, and how do they shape your behavior? Question 2. What anxieties keep you up at night? Question 3. How do you cope with uncertainty and a lack of control? Question number 4. What situations trigger irrational or exaggerated emotional reactions in you? Question number 5. How do you react to perceived rejection or abandonment? Question 6. What compulsive thoughts or behaviors do you struggle with, if any? Question 7. In what ways do you overanalyze or obsess over things? Question 8. How do you handle feelings of guilt or shame? Question 9. Do you create unnecessary problems for yourself through worry or overthinking? A good example of this might be vacillating on important decisions, overthinking things, and making decisions and then reversing those decisions. Question 10, last question. How does your self-image contribute to your anxiety? So these were important questions. And when I think about neuroses, I think about what Sigmund Freud would have said. He said that neuroses were a substitute for the legitimate suffering, right? What does that mean? It means there's some unresolved challenge there or problem that you need to tackle. And dealing with that problem often involves pain and suffering. And that's just the learning and growing through that problem. And Carl Jung would have said, rather than attempting to get rid of our neuroses or hide them, we need to understand them and experience what they mean and what they have to teach us about ourselves, right? So both of these giants of psychology thought that our neuroses, right, our fears, our stress, our anxiety, our depression, all those things are caused from some unresolved problem that we have, some fear. And so that is the intent of these questions, is to get at what's behind that, what's behind your neurosis, right? And these are often things that you yourself can't see. And people spend years in therapy and things like that to understand these things. And so the idea here is to get at these neuroses through these questions and get some real growth, personal growth in our lives by facing these things and tackling them, growing through them. All right, so part 6, psychological defense mechanisms. What is a psychological defense mechanism? So this is an idea that Sigmund Freud pioneered, well established in psychology, but a psychological defense mechanism is an unconscious psychological mechanism that protects people, a person, from an overwhelming emotion, impulse, or an internal conflict. So this would include something like repression or denial. Maybe the truth is so painful that you deny its existence, or maybe the emotion you're feeling because of a situation is so painful that you repress that emotion. And Freud believed, and many other psychologists believe, that this is where mental illness comes from, depression comes from. When we repress or deny things that we know inside are true, it creates stress in our life. And so psychological defense mechanisms are really important in shadow work. Understanding what it is that you might be repressing or denying the truth of, that's what we need to get at in shadow work so that we can grow and integrate our true selves into our conscious selves. Question number 1. Do you use humor to deflect from deeper issues? Question 2. When are you most likely to blame others instead of looking inward and accepting the blame for yourself? Question 3. How do you rationalize behaviors that you know are unhealthy? Question 4. When do you shut down emotionally and avoid feeling vulnerable? Question 5. How do you react when someone points out one of your flaws? Question 6. What situations make you defensive and why? Question number 8. How do you escape discomfort? Do you do it through distractions, avoidance, or denial? Question 9. In what ways do you project your own insecurities onto others? Question 10. What truths about yourself do you struggle to accept? So that's all the questions for defense mechanisms, but it's really important here, and what you want to write down or make a note of are the areas in your life, whether it's an area like finances or it's associated with some character flaw, the areas where you're using defense mechanisms like projection, denial, repression to hide from things, right? Projection would include, you're projecting your character flaw onto someone else. The truth is you're angry, but you're telling them they're angry during the debate you're having with them, right? Because you don't want to face the truth. Or it could be an area you're in complete denial of. And these are usually things that make you feel emotionally uncomfortable. That's what we're trying to get at here. So write those things down. Hopefully you can see some themes. Part 7, negative core beliefs. So what is a negative core belief? Negative core belief is a negative belief that you have about yourself, about others, or about the world that you don't know you have, right? And that's a complicated thing. Negative core beliefs are typically formed in childhood, um, and they can be simple little things like it's hard to make money, or they can be more complicated core beliefs like I am not worthy. And we all have certain negative core beliefs. If you're really lucky and you've had a very positive, healthy childhood, you have a lot of positive core beliefs. But some of us usually have one or two negative core beliefs that are just there in your subconscious. And the idea in these questions is to try to get to those negative core beliefs, right? So let's begin. Question 1. What do you believe about yourself that you wouldn't say to another person? Question 2. What reoccurring negative thoughts do you have about yourself? Question 3. How do you react to compliments? Do you believe them? Question 4. What do you assume people think about you, and is it actually true? Question 5. Where did your deepest insecurities originate? When do you first remember feeling them? Question 6. Do you believe you are worthy of love and success? Why or why not? Question 7. What limiting beliefs hold you back from pursuing your goals and dreams? Question 8. How do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? Question 9. What evidence do you have that contradicts your negative self-perceptions? Question 10. What positive truths about yourself do you struggle to internalize and accept? Question number 11. Do you think other people in general are one of the following: kind, unkind, good, or bad? Why do you think this? Question 12. Last question. Do you think the world is a safe place or a dangerous place, and why? So, like I said, negative core beliefs are beliefs about yourself, the the people around you, other people, and the world that are negative. And you want to find out what those things are, right? And you may believe that the world is a dangerous place, and it can be, right? But A realistic core belief would be the world is both dangerous and safe. It depends on what I'm doing in the world. And so, my realistic core belief might be that the world can be dangerous, but if I make good decisions and stay out of danger, it can also be a safe and a fun and a happy place. And so, a lot of times, negative core beliefs alter the way we interact with the world and the people in it and can create unhealthy behaviors. And so, the idea here is to discover your negative core beliefs so you can overcome them, because they are also limiting beliefs. They limit you as a person. They limit the relationships you have because they're holding you back. And so you want to discover what those beliefs are. And that's what these questions are focused on. So this is part 2 of the shadow workbook, and involves integration of your shadow. Part 2, facing the truth, integrating the shadow, and starting the journey to individuation. So if you answered the questions now, you might feel exhausted. There may be some answers which you weren't prepared for, which you weren't expecting. If so, I think that's a good thing. It means you've made some honest progress, which isn't easy for everyone to do. I would suggest coming back to this workbook and these questions from time to time to discover new things about yourself. After this first run, though, let's focus on our next steps, which includes integration of our shadow and eventually individuation. Step 1, witnessing your shadow without judgment. The process of shadow integration begins with a fundamental shift in our perception. Rather than avoiding or suppressing the answers that arose from the questions and the deep introspection that you had to make to answer them, you must now turn toward them with radical honesty and self-compassion. The insights gained from shadow work are not meant to be buried or judged, but to be understood, accepted, and ultimately integrated into our conscious selves. Only then can individuation, the realization of your fullest potential and your most authentic self, actually take place. Resist the urge to rationalize, minimize, or reject each difficult childhood experience, past trauma, character flaw, psychological blind spot, and negative core belief you have uncovered. Instead, become an impartial observer of your own psyche and faults, and inventory them in the space below. Acknowledge the emotions that arise, whether they be fear, sadness, anger, or shame, and allow them to exist without suppressing them. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is a neglected part of you which is yearning to be recognized. We must embrace it and accept its faults to truly become an authentic person. So for the person listening to this audiobook, the workbook itself has got a space provided where you can do a shadow work inventory. And simply put, you're going to write down your difficult childhood experiences, your past traumas, your character flaws, your psychological blind spots, and negative core beliefs. Basically, all of the things you've identified in the questions we just ran through. And I think the best way to do this is to focus on at least one from each of those questions, right? Focus on one past trauma, one difficult childhood experience, one character flaw, and really focus in on those things. So maybe when you do this inventory, you want to just list one of each. I would go with 3 maximum. I wouldn't do over 3. You really want to make this manageable for the next steps in the workbook. But I do suggest writing this stuff down in the space provided in the workbook. I do that. Occasionally I do this while I'm driving. I listen to an audiobook or something like that. But I've always got in my mind a running list of things when I'm doing this type of self-development work. Step 2, tracing the origins of your shadow. Every hidden fear, insecurity, or destructive pattern has a history somewhere within your past, perhaps within your childhood. More than likely within your childhood. That's the way this works. Revisit your answers and ask yourself, where did this behavior originate? Where did this belief originate? How many of these things that you've written down came from your childhood? It may be that they came from later in life, later traumas that happened in your life. Maybe you lost a loved one, and that's when your negative core belief or your negative behavior developed. But trace it to its origin. Again, there's a space in the workbook to write down where the behavior originated. And I would do this for each key thing that you've identified in the shadow questions. Second part of this is, how old was I when I first felt or believed this belief or observed this behavior, exhibited this behavior? How old was I? Was I a teenager? Was I in elementary school? Was I an adult? When did this first happen? And this last part is very important. Who or what reinforced this belief, behavior, neurosis, character defect? A lot of times, bad things happen, and there's some life event that reinforces a behavior or belief that is a consequence of the original bad event. And I'll give you an example, right? Maybe you grew up in poverty, and maybe you yourself had a hard time climbing out of poverty, and all of that activity may have reinforced the belief that money is difficult, life is difficult, and the world is against me. It doesn't want what's good for me. Inversely, you could have also used that as motivation, but we're talking about negative core beliefs here, neuroses, character flaws, blind spots, and so try to identify each of these things that you've written down from the 7 sets of questions and figure out where they came from in your life. So here's why we're doing this. By understanding the roots of your shadow's aspects, you loosen their unconscious grip over your thoughts and your actions. When you see them as conditional responses rather than inherited flaws, you begin to reclaim your personal power. The idea is that these negative aspects of yourself are learned. They're not innate in you. They are not who you are. They're defense mechanisms that you've learned because of the way your life has been, because of events that have happened. And so in a way, many of these things are healthy because they protect you. They're your shadow's way of protecting you. But that doesn't mean you have to continue to act upon them. You don't have to continue to believe your core beliefs. And so the idea here, and understanding their origin, is to separate them from the real, authentic you. Step 3, accepting and integrating your negative character traits. So shadow integration is not about eradicating the weakness you've just discovered. It's about embracing each weakness as a part of your wholeness and accepting the simple fact that none of us are perfect. We all have faults. Instead of rejecting your anger, for example, ask how it might serve as a source of strength when expressed constructively. Instead of rejecting your own greed, accept it and acknowledge that you need to make an extra effort to tip generously or spend more for others on gifts. Acknowledging that you underperform at math, for instance, might allow you to either study hard for it or focus on your strengths, the areas where you excel, in writing, for instance. Acknowledging that you have these faults will allow you to atone for them and be a better, more capable human being. If you uncover an unhealthy coping mechanism, rather than condemning yourself, Explore what deeper need it is trying to fulfill. By consciously acknowledging your shadow's weaknesses and faults, they transform from sources of self-sabotage into sources of wisdom. Inventory your weaknesses and character faults below. Remember to focus especially on character traits that bother you when observed in others. These are most likely your own character traits. Below each character trait, write the redeeming character trait. This is the new character trait you need to focus on practicing more of in your life once you acknowledge your weaknesses. This is a fundamental part of integration, a conscious effort to acknowledge and improve your weaknesses and become a whole, authentic person. So I think this is one of the most useful parts of shadow work, is this part of the inventory where we inventory our negative character faults and our redeeming behaviors. So I want to give you a few examples of how I think this should work. There is no right or wrong way to do this, but let's just dive into this. Character fault 1, fear. So if fear is your major character fault, if it's holding you back, what is the thing that you can practice that is the opposite? So for me, the opposite of fear is faith. Fear knocks and faith answers. And so if I had fear as my negative character trait, and that's what I exhibited when I felt fear, I would instead try to demonstrate faith. You might also demonstrate courage, bravery. Pick your own redeeming character trait. That's the idea here. So if you exhibit weakness, then it's time to exhibit strength. And really think about how you want to exhibit strength or faith in your life. Think about what that looks like for you. It's different for everyone. I'll give you another example. If you have the character fault of greed, you should exhibit instead generosity. So think about how you're going to do that in your life. For me, I try to tip well. I try to tip well when I'm eating out, and that's one of the things I do. So put some thought into this, and if I were you, I would list out about 4 negative character faults and 4 redeeming behaviors, right? Step 4, reframing your negative core beliefs. Your shadow often houses deep-seated negative core beliefs that distort your self-perception and your perception of others and the world. After identifying these negative core beliefs, you must work to actively challenge them and eventually change them. For instance, if you've always believed, "I am unworthy of love," you must now find evidence in your life that contradicts this belief and validates the true core belief that you are worthy of love and that you are loved. If you have internalized the belief that "I must always be in control," examine how this has limited you in your life and replace this old narrative with a more balanced belief such as, "I do not always need to be in control. As long as I have acted responsibly, I've done all I can do. Control is not necessary." These new, realistic core beliefs may seem like simple truths, but you should work to accept them every day, because once you forget them, your shadow will again work to make you forget that you still believe your old negative core beliefs, all in an attempt to protect you. Identify your old negative core beliefs and write down your new realistic core beliefs in the space provided. Meditate on your new realistic core beliefs each day. This simple rewiring of our thought patterns is an essential part of individuation. It allows you to move beyond the conditioning that has confined you up until this point in your life. So just a note to the audiobook listener, this is an important part of the exercise. Our negative core beliefs are so deeply ingrained in our thoughts and our behaviors because they live in our subconscious. They're always there. And so you really need to spend a lot of time thinking about your new realistic core beliefs and what you want those to be, and identify the evidence for those new beliefs in your life. And you need to spend a lot of time each day acknowledging these new beliefs throughout the day, and just seeing the evidence that they are true in your life. I can promise you that they are. You're worthy of being loved. You're capable of being successful. These old negative core beliefs are just old defense mechanisms that no longer serve any function or purpose. They need to be discarded, and that needs to be done so that you can live a full, meaningful life. Step 5, practicing shadow expression. So, a significant part of integration involves giving your shadow a voice in a healthy way. If you've suppressed emotions like anger or grief in the past, identify healthy ways to express them through things like journaling, art, movement, sports, or open conversations with healthy people you can trust. Identify those outlets below. If certain traits in others trigger you, reflect on how they mirror something within yourself that you've disowned, something you failed to acknowledge, some negative character flaw. Allowing safe expression of your repressed emotions and traits prevents them from manifesting destructively in your own life. So let's write them down, and for each one, let's identify how we're going to express it in a healthy, safe way. So, for instance, negative emotion number 1, fear, for example. I will express this in a healthy way by what? A good example might be talking to someone about that fear. It might be facing that fear. Think about how you're going to express that emotion in a healthy way, or deal with it in a healthy way. Step 6, embody your wholeness. Integration isn't just an intellectual process. It is something that must be lived. You have to live these changes in your life. Pay attention to daily situations where your shadow may arise, steering you down old familiar roads that are sometimes perceived as being safe, but they may lead you to the same problems you've repeatedly encountered in your life. When you recognize an old wound being triggered or a defense mechanism surfacing, pause and consciously choose a new healthy response. Each moment of awareness weakens the hold of your shadow's old unconscious patterns and strengthens your ability to act from a place of authenticity and wholeness. Over time, this new place of being and a newfound deep self-acceptance will foster a sense of inner harmony where our conscious being and our shadow can coexist rather than compete. And that brings us to step 7, the final step, and that is to continue the journey. Shadow work is not a one-time exercise. It is a lifelong process. This is a journey, and as you evolve, new aspects of your shadow will surface, revealing deeper layers of itself. By consistently engaging in shadow work with curiosity rather than resistance, you allow individuation to unfold naturally over the course of your life. The more you integrate the hidden aspects of your shadow, the more authentic and empowered you will become. Ultimately, shadow integration is the path to reclaiming all of your true self, not just the parts of you that are socially acceptable or comfortable to society and the people around you. By courageously facing your shadow, you step into your full power, shedding old illusions and emerging as a whole, individuated person who can truly be comfortable in their own skin. Closing. Remember, shadow work is not a one-time exercise. This is a lifelong process. Actively practice this process of integration by acknowledging your shadow's shortcomings and thereby integrating them into your own thoughts and actions. Come back to shadow work exercises from time to time when you start to feel your unconscious mind and your shadow's shortcomings driving your conscious thoughts and behaviors. And most importantly, always remember that self-improvement is always a journey, never a destination. Thank you for downloading and listening to my workbook.